Welcome back to the Two Promises podcast. Let's dive right into another exciting adventure with BD and crew as he pursues his new passion of one day finding the most epic bourbon. The Two Promises team send their special thanks to Hobie and the Huckleberries for their masterful theme music. So grab a glass, relax, and enjoy responsibly.
Baby says she's leaving if I don't stop drinking wine. So I switched to whiskey, now I'm feeling fine. Drinking that smooth, smooth whiskey. No more wine. I like straight bourbon. Baby, you try the ride.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm really excited to welcome a very special guest to the show. He's completed a project that is a very central theme to the work that we're doing here at Two Promises and the future efforts that I'm engaged in. And it's really great to have somebody that is so like-minded and that is so far along in the process. So I'm really excited to introduce Mr. Brian Ricketts. He is an author. He is a veteran, and not just in the DoD, like active duty world, but also served quite a bit of time as a contractor overseas during OIF and OEF. He just completed a book that is already available, and I'm going to introduce him to tell us a little bit about himself, his story, and then we're going to dive into his book, what that's all about, and what the purpose behind it is. Mr. Ricketts, take it away.
Hi, how are you doing? Hi, everybody. Well, like Brenda said, my name's Brian. I recently wrote this book to try and focus on some of this stuff that's going on. A little background on me. As Brent mentioned, I'm ex-military. I spent 7 years active duty with the Navy and also worked as a POG contractor during OAF. I also did a little time with the Coast Guard as an auxiliarist right after 9/11. Since then, most of my career was writing software, so I've really been out of it until recently. Now that I'm retired, I just got the bug to start writing about this, and particularly since the stuff in Syria has happened, and we've blundered into that again, of course. I got the concept for this book from a friend of mine who's a retired VA administrator. He's also an ex-Marine. Conceptually, this book is really designed to highlight and focus what female soldiers go through, because they have the same problems that all of us guys do, but it's a little more intense for them because of their nature, or basically because they're women. You know, they've got different feelings about things than guys do, or I should say they express them more readily. They also have a lot of physical problems because of it. You know, their internal plumbing is different, and they have problems with their cycles every month. And it's just a big problem for them. It really centers on that.
Right. Yeah. Their bodies, their hormones, all of the systems. Yeah, they're different. Go ahead.
The book really centers on that. The heroine in this, or the protagonist, if you will, is a Navy pilot who gets severely injured in a crash in Syria. Now, this story is based around some actual battles that took place at a FOB there called Al-Tanf, T-A-N-F. It was supposed to be a clandestine base, but it's really not. You know, there's been a number of fights over it by all the various factions, mostly ISIS. The Syrian army and the Russians and the Free Syrian Army, which is, you know, rebels themselves. They've all fought over it, and we've been involved in it right from the get-go, about probably a mid-2015, 2016 time frame.
Right. Yeah, so tell me about, what's the name of your book again?
The name of the book is Blood, Tears, and Purple Hearts. But it kind of gives you a description of what the whole story is about. The battle where people are bleeding, they're hurt, they're screwed up, and the protagonist, again, she loses her leg in the crash, so she's disabled somewhat and isn't allowed to go back to flying, which she wants to do, and the Navy will not allow it. So she has a lot of stress over that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can definitely relate some of those themes. I didn't lose my leg, but whenever I was leaving the military, I was really wanting to continue to serve. I was very close to hitting the retirement age, and honestly, I was putting in an officer's package. I was just finishing up my degree, was talking to people, kind of working out the programs specifically to apply to, and then I kind of ran into my own health issues, and those can be a little bit one-sided and have their own ways of developing, but everything happens for a reason. I'm here now, and we're on the back end of it. So I think obviously myself and many other veterans can definitely relate to a lot of those themes of the purpose behind their actions, what they were doing over there, trying to enhance worldwide security, and then the after effects of any injuries, both visible, like her losing her leg, and also some of those invisible traumas that it seems like a lot of your book is really focused on.
Well, to be really honest with you, Brent, my intention with this was to bring it out for people who aren't necessarily connected with the military, so they really understand what they're doing to people. When I say they, I'm talking about the people in our government that don't think twice about wasting us on, pointless fights.
Right. And I think that that's a very important thing for advocacy and awareness at this point in time. A little bit in our little pre-call chat, you'd mentioned some of the treatments and effects and the way that socially, the civilian population, the government, and, the world at large responded to the Vietnam veterans. You were right around that time period, so I think that you really experienced a lot of that going on. Do you mind diving into that a little bit more for our listeners?
Oh, yeah, yeah. I didn't experience directly like the guys that were coming back from combat did. A lot of those guys come back, they fly into Travis Air Force Base. And at that time, of course, there were all kinds of protesters out of Berkeley. And little girls that come up there and throw dry dog shit at everybody, call them baby killers. And for me, it was a little past that, but still, when I went home, I grew up in Michigan. That's a very liberal state. So they're not really supportive of the military or veterans per se. Literally, I got cold shoulder. I mean, nobody wanted to talk about it. In fact, I had one friend who I saw him shortly after I got back, and he says, "Well, okay, you're home now. You're over your illness, so let's just go party somewhere." I'm like, "What the hell's wrong with you, man? No, we're not doing that shit anymore." And that's kind of it in a nutshell, other than the fact that civilians generally think you're a loser if you're ex-military. At least they did then. I don't know how it was for you guys, but I suspect it was pretty similar.
Gotcha. So there's some serious social stigmas involved, and it could happen at various levels, various degrees. Not everyone, I think, falls into those extreme categories of throwing dog poop. But I think one of the things that you're really trying to get at is, yes, we had issues back then, and I totally agree. It was an awful period of history and the treatment of veterans. In a lot of ways, we like to believe that as a society, we've matured, that we've grown, and that we have moved beyond that. But what I believe, and I think that you're saying as well, is that the base reality is that as much as we may have improved, it seems like there's just been a glossing over or a rebranding of how that treatment has been projected onto the service members themselves. Almost like it's not dog poop in the physical sense of dog poop, but sometimes the actions, inactions, and attitudes can be perceived as essentially throwing metaphorical dog poop
Yeah.
at the veterans returning.
Yeah, that's probably a fair assessment of it, I'm sure. for me, in my generation, it was a lot more literal, but yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Whenever I was working through my medical things, it was a very calculated and rehearsed process, it seemed, of finding ways to shell game my medical condition. So I went in,
Yeah.
I had 7 deployments at this point as a Navy SEAL medic with leadership roles. I was also a JTAC on the majority of my deployments. And I knew I was facing issues, medical issues. Sleep was a huge problem of mine. And I knew that I did have, symptoms of PTSD, but whenever you're actually experiencing it, it doesn't look like what you think it is. Your actual projections and manifestations of the symptoms are a lot different from what you think. So you talk yourself out of it. You say that you don't, that's not you. You don't really have it. And then they really start growing and affecting other areas of your life. And then at some point, you're almost in it too far before you really even catch it. I did attempt to go to therapy and counselors with varying degrees of success throughout my career. But as a reservist specifically, it is very, very difficult to get any care for mental health. And they say that they don't stigmatize it, but they absolutely do.
Oh, yeah.
And I went to the Y. I went to independent people who had grant fundings through colleges, through their programs, wherever they went through. But it was not really the care that was needed. And then I went into crisis and I really did need care. And I knew what steps would be helpful for me because I've seen my friends and my peers go through them themselves. I've seen the therapies that were effective for them. I've seen the pitfalls that they found themselves in. Whenever I went in to get my initial consult for mental health to get a referral to the polytrauma clinic that would deal with PTSD, brain injury, a lot of the central themes of your book.
Sure.
Instead of giving me the referrals and giving me my insurance authorizations to proceed, they did not diagnose me with what I was referred to, post-traumatic stress. They diagnosed me with a different medical condition, bipolar, no mention of
Bipolar, huh?
PTS, on a phone call, not even a video call, a 30, 40-minute phone call. They didn't give me a bipolar screening questionnaire. They gave me a PTS questionnaire, right? So it was literally just an administrative mechanism to push me aside, to stop my active service, to remove me from the Navy, and also delay any care. I requested referrals out in town. I requested to get into their clinics. All of them were ignored from that point on. So no, dog poop was not thrown at me, but an administrative bureaucracy that was weaponized against me was absolutely thrown at me. And I believe that's being thrown at many, many other veterans throughout the continent. And this is something that I'm really grateful for your book to be able to be raising awareness for, because we need voices like yours to raise up and get the attention so that we can pressure our lawmakers into making some type of change.
Well, I'll tell you, I really would like to see this become a movement. If it starts with my book, that's fine. And I pledge to you right now that anything that I make off of this, a portion of that is going to go to Wounded Warriors and PTSD Foundation and another women's organization called Proudly She Served. I don't know if you've ever heard of Christy Ennis, but she's a member of that. Christy Ennis is an ex-Marine who lost a leg. I think it was in Iraq, I forget, but she was a door gunner and she lost a leg in a crash. She's a big spokesman for women's veterans services now. So I pledge to you right now, brother, part of this money is going to go support that. And I have a website coming out soon where I hope people are going to get to it and blog with me. And we'll try to put our heads together and come up with a way to approach this that actually addresses the needs of veterans and how we can get the government to own up to it.
That is absolutely phenomenal what you're doing, the way that you're giving back and highlighting those stories of heroism from our female Marines, our female aviators, and all of these other individuals that have gone into combat, that have put their lives on the line to protect us, to protect their teammates, to protect other socioeconomic groups within countries that are being marginalized and attacked. And there's all of this talk about genocide in the media now, but it's happening. It's really has been happening. Like you mentioned, the shirt that I'm wearing is from a buddy of mine. It's actually a foundation from him, Charles Keating, and he was killed working with a lot of these marginalized Iraqis that the Christian side, you know what I'm saying, that were fighting against the ISIS terrorists that were destroying history, destroying culture, killing a lot of innocent people.
Well, I don't know if you've looked at it yet, but in chapter 3 in the book, I try to address their mindset, how they feel about it. But the reality for them is a lot of them are carrying guilt about it too. They don't really want to do this, but their religion calls for them to do this, and they're getting paid to do it, so they got to do it. At least that's how they feel about it from my perspective. But towards the end of that chapter, the head of this cell, this group of ISIS, he comes to realize that his hallucinations are because of his guilt, not because of some desert genie. Well, that's what he imagines. I don't know if you know a lot about Islam, but the jinn are a big part of that. They believe in that fervently. At least that's what I'm led to believe by Muslim friends. So I'm not Muslim, so I don't know for sure, but I thought it was a good theme for that particular chapter.
Yeah, I like how you've
just to give a little bit more color to the story.
Right, delved into the psychological things that are affecting the people on the other side of the ideological spectrum. I think that's a really great way to look at it and to present it. I know I read a book. It was basically about a double agent who went into a extreme Muslim Islamic training pipeline and camp to
Sure.
in turn be an operative. If it comes to me, I'll share it with you, but it was a very interesting take on that whole world and the pressures that young people in the Middle East face, recruiting efforts, etc. Then, of course, from their financial spectrum and stuff like that. So it's really cool to see that you've incorporated some of those elements into your novel.
Well, I figured somebody ought to at least try to bring it up that way, and it might as well be me. So I don't know. I guess we'll see where that goes. But hopefully they don't put out a fatwa on me and try to kill me.
Right.
Just imagine, though, as much trouble as we're having, imagine how many tens of thousands of Muslims in Iraq and Afghanistan and now Syria have been killed over this crap. For nothing. It's for nothing.
Right.
Nobody wins.
Right.
At least that's how I feel about it. I'm sure there are people that still swallow the Kool-Aid and think we're doing a righteous thing, but in the long run, nobody cares. They got their way of living and we got ours. They don't want ours, which I'm sure you're completely aware of.
You're right. It's definitely a very complex issue. So if you don't mind, if you would like to go further on the heartbeat behind the book, I'd like to open the floor for that. And if you think that you've sufficiently expressed that, then we can move on to another question.
I don't want to make it sound like it's strictly a war novel, because it's not. It's really based on the experiences of these two women after they've been cut loose by the Navy, how they try to recover and deal with disability and traumatic trauma. Like, for example, the other pilot, she's got severe headaches. She can't shake them. She can't deal with them. And eventually the VA cuts her off on OxyContin. So she has to turn to street drugs. It's the only way it gets rid of the pain for her. And they don't really know what to do. They say, well, you might have a concussion. It might be TBI, but we can't really do anything for you but give you meds. And then eventually they cut off the meds because they tell her they're opiates and they're habit forming and she can't have any.
Gotcha.
So, of course, then she turns to, and that just goes downhill from there. And that's, well, I'll just tell you she doesn't survive, but I'm not going to give you any details because I'll spoil the read for you. But in a lot of ways, it's a very sad story. But it has some uplifting points, too. I actually have a section in it where the main protagonist is really pulled out of her funk by a dog. She adopts a disabled war dog, and the two of them become very attached to each other. She realizes that this gives her something to hang on to. She has somebody to look after her, and they look after her. That's kind of also based on a true story about disabled war dogs. I don't know if you're aware of it or not, but you can actually go and adopt a retired war dog. They got PTSD like all of us can get it. Not to mention, of course, they get physical injuries like losing limbs and who knows what else.
Absolutely. That sounds fantastic. You have blended a lot of elements in this book, not just what goes on deployments, not just the injuries that can be sustained, but the integration of a lot of units, like the multi-purpose canines or, working dogs, all of those things. There's different levels of them. And like you said, the ability to adopt them, to give them a home so that they don't have to be retired. And I think that you're doing a lot of really good things with this book, bringing awareness to a lot of topics, a lot of issues. And I think that's going to really expose the American public to different ways that they can support. Maybe they don't support, like you mentioned, hey, what are we really getting out of this? Are we just perpetuating a cycle of violence? But people, a lot of the big things is maybe you don't support the war, but support the warrior, support the soldier, support the animals. So there are a lot of people who I do believe want to get involved and want to be helpful and want to find a way that they can positively impact things, and opening up the door to them to be able to adopt a retired service animal could be a way that both the person and the animal could find healing and connection and companionship that would really make a world of difference.
Yeah, actually, in the introduction to the book, I make a point out of that. I really point out that I'm not really trying to say that we should or shouldn't be involved in these conflicts, but we are, and this is the reality of it. People get killed, they get maimed, they get damaged mentally. We have to help them. We send them, so we got to mend them. That's a new saying, by the way. If you send them, you must mend them.
That's such a very good way to put it. Very
If they
great way to
want to
put
keep
it.
doing all this stuff, then, well, they got to put people back together. There's just no other way around it. And that's something we didn't really have in my day. They just basically told you, well, get over it, buck up, deal with it.
Right.
To some extent, that'll work, but, for for some people, it just doesn't work. And you can't leave them out on the street to die. You got to take care of them.
Right. At some point, they're going to have to address that. They're going to have to process it, and they should be able to have access to the tools, the techniques, the medical, everything, research and facilities that have been established since Vietnam to make it better. One of my big points is we have the research, we have the procedures, we have things that actually work. Obviously, the person has to be willing to do the work themselves, but it's a travesty that we've invested all this money, we have them available, and yet for insurance denial reasons or because of personal politics, work politics, whatever you might want to call it, these therapies and treatments are being withheld from the people who really need it and that they paid into it. It's not like we got free insurance. No,
Yeah,
we paid our
exactly.
insurance premiums from our paycheck. So it's not a free gift from the government that we should be just grateful that we get anything out of. No, this was a policy in my name that I paid for. And for people to just create all of these institutional barriers is appalling.
Oh, I agree completely. Well, I was just trying to think what else I could tell you about the book.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you wouldn't mind giving us kind of like a broad strokes, maybe your summary, your attention grabber, what it is that you would tell somebody that you met in the Uber, taxi, whatever, or just out in the streets and the topic comes up. Hey, what do you do? Oh, I wrote this book. Oh, great. What's it about? What would your 30-second pitch be?
Well, the real message in it, particularly for veterans, is do the things that we've always done best. You adapt, you overcome. That's how you win. there's no cure for it. It's just us learning how to cope with it. How do we deal with it? I mean, other than that, all they're going to do is give you drugs. You want to live on drugs the rest of your life? No, that's not going to work. It's just going to make things worse. You just have to come to terms with it in some way, somehow. At least that's my take. I'm sure the doctors are going to tell you something completely different, but the reality of it is we just have to learn to live with it.
That's an excellent point. So, moving on, I guess, from that, in that piece, is there a particular story that jumps out to you that you did describe more on the book, during the book, that you would like to share with the readers as like a little teaser trailer?
Well, the main gist for the protagonist is the fact that she wants to fly in the worst way. Her whole life has been centered around this. She spent a number of years training herself, going to college on her own, starving because she basically bootstrapped it all right up from nothing. She came from a broken home. She went through the foster system for kids with no parents. I mean, that's enough right there to traumatize anybody. But the woman's strong enough, she overcame that, and she went to college, went in the military, and she's very successful. And then this happens. So later in the book, there's a point at which she reaches rock bottom when she's really ready to kill herself. That's when the dog enters the scene, and you get, at least I'm trying to point out that things are going to come at you out of left field that are going to help. In this case, it's a dog. And the simple things are the things that are going to save your life. It's not going to be some VA doctor. And that's kind of the gist of it, is going from despair and disability to creating your own form of recovery. I mean, we all go through that.
Absolutely.
If you experience this at all, you go through it. If you're going to recover, you're going to go through it.
Right.
Now, I don't want to paint myself as a combat veteran, because I'm not, but I had a lot of stuff happen in the Navy that I never thought would give me PTSD. Plus, I had a really traumatic childhood. So, in studying things for this book, I realized that I had a lot of those symptoms myself, even at my age, although a lot of it's faded over the years, but it's still there.
Absolutely. And that's another thing that I wanted to kind of ask you about and get into you with is, one, I want to say thank you for what you did. Thank you for having the courage to stand up past your childhood experiences, military experiences, and have a voice to do something about it. I just read a book recently by another SEAL, Mike Day, and he describes the childhood and upbringing that he and his half brother went through as well. And that is a very important social commentary piece that I think needs to be addressed. And that is the incidence of abuse, child abuse in our communities, in the civilian world. And one offshoot that I hope that the efforts of people like you and myself can do is what I've been describing as the spillover effect. A lot of times, we've got these government programs through the VA. The VA is one of the only places that has on their forms for cause of death to be suicide. Most other places do not have that specifically. So that's why there is actual data on veteran suicides, how much, how often, prevalence, etc. While in the civilian world, you don't have quite the metrics to measure what's going on in the population. And whenever it comes to abuse, broken homes, things like that, it is a lot worse out there than we realize, because so much of it's glossed over, so much of it is not talked about. So it takes confident voices to speak up like you did. And Mike Day also had a very abusive childhood. And like you said, we do have to find our ways to get through it. We have to find our ways to pull ourselves out, to fight forward. And you coming forward and doing this book is an excellent expression of that. Would you say that the work that you did, putting this book together, writing this book, was therapeutic and healing for yourself as well?
Yeah, I have to say it was, but like I say, it was a real painful process. I had to really evaluate things that had happened and how I felt about them. But in the long run, like I say, I pretty much gotten over it. I'm lucky that I found a good wife and I have a good daughter, and I've had a reasonably good life since I left the Navy and my
That's excellent.
civilian career. I worked as a software developer for 35 years. Doing stuff like that, you don't really have time to think about your inner problems, and you're busy all the time. I don't know if that's good or bad, but that's kind of how it fell out.
Right. So it seems like what I'm hearing is that you kind of had to relive some of those experiences a lot while you were doing the book. And I imagine that also had to come at its own time.
Right.
It wasn't something that you could force. You had to work through it yourself in order to articulate it on paper the way that you needed to.
Well, I'm retired now, so it makes a lot of difference. I have a lot of time on my hands. So when I started reading about all these various symptoms, I was like, holy crap. You just start to think back and what happened and why you're the way you are, basically. And yeah, that was really painful, but it's over now. I I can deal with it. I mean, I'm 70 years old, so I can deal with a lot of shit now. I'm over the hump, if you will.
That's great. Right. So you also mentioned you have this available in English, and you said you're working on some other languages. What's your rationale behind some of that?
Well, at this point in time, all I have is English and Spanish. I did that because we have a big population of Spanish speakers. A lot of them, of course, they don't like to use English as their primary language. So, and a lot of veterans are like that too. They come from big Spanish families. Spanish is basically the second most spoken language in the world. So it gives a broader reach for the book in any case. And you have to realize too that it's not just American soldiers that have these problems. It's literally from everywhere.
Absolutely.
That includes Spanish speaking soldiers in other countries.
Hmm.
So maybe it'll help them too. I don't know. I hope so.
Yeah. It sounds like you really do have a global vision for an impact.
Yeah, that's really was my goal. Plus, as I was telling you earlier, I'm working on a screenplay for this. Hopefully, is going to go to a film at some point.
That's excellent.
And the lady I have in mind to play this role is part Hispanic. And she's a fairly well-known actress, but I can't give you her name because I don't have any legal permission to say it. But, she seems quite receptive to it. We'll see it. She would be a good spokesman for this too, because she's really a supporter of charities. She does a lot of charitable work, so it's a perfect fit. I hope it pans out. At least that's my goal with it.
Absolutely. That's what we got to push for. And that's what we're doing. So I'm really grateful for all of the work that you've done, for coming on the show, sharing your story, talking a little bit about your project, your vision. And I am really excited to see all the work that's going to occur and the positive changes that we're going to see both societally and within the government systems to help our veterans, and then also the healthcare community to ensure that mental health spills over. That's kind of where I was going with that, was if we can focus on a population where we already have the infrastructure engaged in, they've already been trained and indoctrinated, if you will, to work as a team, to leave no person behind, then the hope is that these therapies, processes, ways to get access within the system or improvements of the system will then spill over into the civilian side, and it will enrich our communities. It will get people within the community access to the health care that they need, addiction, recovery, abuse, whatever it is that they're working through, trying to recover from, that they can take these processes, procedures, and they will filter over into the daily lives of each individual in our community, and that will make our community stronger, our families stronger, our economy stronger. Everything will be just built up in a much more edifying way through, and it can be done through this system, through this pipeline.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree totally. On the other hand, though, we kind of have to think about the fact that we as veterans are going to have to do this ourselves. I mean, we may have to put together a support network of our own,
Right.
at least in the interim, until we can get support from the powers that be, if that ever happens. I'm more hopeful now than I ever have been, particularly with people in your age group now that are starting to take the reins of power. We got a totally different mindset, and we got 25 years of war behind us now. So there's a lot of people that are involved in it that wouldn't ordinarily have been. That's going to be a big factor. At least that's how I feel about it.
Absolutely.
But, just take a look at some of the people that are in the current administration now. You got Hegseth. He's an ex-Army lieutenant colonel. He's the Secretary of Defense. Well, we've also got Lieutenant Colonel Gabbard, who's the DNI now. I mean, there's a whole slew of them that are ex-military. They're going to be good for us, in my opinion. They'll be really good for us. But we'll see. I could be completely wrong, but hopefully I'm not.
Yeah. Hopefully that we've got some good reasons to be optimistic, that our optimism is brought to a positive solution, that it's not just political smoke and mirrors. I think we've been burned by that so many times in the past that it is hard for us to trust and believe, but I really do. I want there to be hope for the future. I want there to be positive things to look forward to. And like you said, a generational movement to where we can change things and make things better, not just for us in the short term, but for generations to follow.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, thank you again so much for coming on the show. I'm excited to get through the rest of your book. Like I said, I just got it recently, and we booked this call really quick, which was awesome. So I'm excited to, one, have you read the book and see all of the things that you do. Any way that we can support you moving forward, we're super excited to do. And I want to turn it over to you for the last word. Anything else you want to share, send it.
Only thing I really have to add is, ladies and gents, just help me out and buy this book. That's the only way I'm going to be able to help other veterans. I pledge to you that portion of anything I make on this is going to go to support veterans' services. And that's all I've got to say, man.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Where can we find you? Where can we find your book? Where do we get in touch with you?
Well, I've had a girl working on a website. It'll be up shortly. It's bjricketts.com. And you can also reach me via email at bjricketts.att.net. Or I'm on Facebook most of the time under my own name and under BJ Ricketts, which is going to be my author profile. Still setting that up, so it's not quite complete yet. But
awesome.
I'm there. I'm also on several other platforms. I'm on TikTok and Instagram and a couple of others, but all the majors. I'm on X.
Fantastic.
So just look for me by name. I'll be there.
Awesome. Thank you so very much. Really appreciate you having you on the show, taking the time to be with us and sharing your past, your future, and the vision that you have. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, thank you, Brent. I appreciate you having me on.
Thank you for joining us today on this curious roller coaster of life. If this is your stop, please exit peacefully. Enjoy the rest of your day. If you're ready for another one, just push play. Just a final note before you go. Thank you. And thank you for feeling. The distillation and aging process is different for everyone. I'm not quite sure what you're ready for. Sip slowly and enjoy responsibly.
Baby says she's leaving if I don't stop drinking wine. So I switched to whiskey and I'm feeling fine. Drinking that slow smoke.